Hello, are you there?
Good morning, Johanna.
Good morning, you are. A roundtable on the new CDIO optional standards is what we are going to have now. I'm going to share my screen. And so there was another musical interlude there, but brief, so let's move on. So the layout of the roundtable is I will give a short introduction first and essentially repeat the motive for having optional standards and which have been adapted so far, and take a look ahead at what we are doing now. And then there are 3 questions to discuss. That is, do we have some feedback on the already adapted optional standards or the process for handling optional standards? So we'll have a breakout session or a couple of breakout teams, depending a little bit on how many will join the roundtable, but it should be prepared for that. And then 10 minutes in the breakout rooms, and then 5 minutes in the plenary to compare opinions and views. And then we'll move on to the next step, and that's really the future evolution of optional CDIO standards. So are there suitable additional ones apart from the 4 that we have already adapted? And some are proposed already, and others may be in the pipeline. Again, a short breakout, and then back into the plenary. And then we have the final question: what are the early experiences from CDIO optional standards self-evaluation? For those of you who have the time to try out the new self-evaluation models, and if there are any inputs from you on that point. And then we have a 5-minute wrap up towards the end. So just to briefly recap the development of CDIO standards 3.0. CDIO standards were originally launched in 2005. And then, of course, a lot of things have happened in terms of application of the CDIO standards, in terms of educational innovations, so forth. So after a while, we felt that we need to update and collect these new change drivers, new pedagogical ideas in order to come up with a renewed CDIO standard. So we keep the CDIO standards as something that is leading the forefront of pedagogical development, showing what is relevant from a teaching best practice point of view, enabling CDIO programs to further develop. And we also decided to come up with a new category of standards, that is optional standards, noting that many CDIO programs that have been around for a while had essentially fulfilled the original 12, and were then looking for additional ways of profiling and making a mark, and that they would on one hand come up with ideas that could be codified as CDIO standards, but it can also be a help for others to see what that could be. So then we put together the CDIO optional standards, and I don't think we should read this chart through the whole way, but we have a number of criteria for what an optional standard should be. I should say that these slides are also in the chat if you want to have them for reference during the discussions. And we have worked with the development of the CDIO optional standards, taking a few iterations, proposing the concept in 2017 originally, and then seeing that some others bought into the idea relatively quickly, and actually for the year after proposed additional standards in addition to the ones that we had identified as candidates. We took another pass at the concept in 2019, and also made a compilation of the candidates for optional standards that we were aware of. 2020 adapted the 4 first optional standards and completed them so that the texts were a bit defined. There were rubrics and so forth, so that they would be operational as CDIO standards in the same way as the traditional core CDIO standards. And now, at this point, looking for some first impressions and then moving on from where we are right now. And this is the role of this roundtable to gather these ideas. Just to remind you of what the optional CDIO standards are, there are 4. There is sustainable development, there is simulation-based mathematics, there is engineering entrepreneurship, and there is internationalization and mobility. So these were the 4 that we felt fulfilled the requirements on optional standards in a clear way, and were able to find a consensus on in the CDIO Council and other people that were involved in the discussions. We have also updated the CDIO self-evaluation spreadsheet so that it also has corresponding tables and rubrics for the optional standards, so that you can use them in the same way as you use the original CDIO standards for self-evaluation. Finally then, as an input, we have adapted 4 optional CDIO standards, and like I hinted at, there have been a number of additional proposals as well. As you can see on this slide, these are not, that they are not adapted doesn't mean that they are rejected, but rather that they might be worked on further and discussed further during this year and coming. The only one that has been rejected is actually digital learning, and that is because the corresponding content was worked into the CDIO Core Standards 3.0. So the content has been taken care of, but there was no need for an optional standard on digital learning.
So we have some feedback from based on work that we have been doing at KTH, led by Anders Rosén. We have implemented the optional standard on sustainable development. And when we started to use the rubrics, we discovered that there were a few places where we needed more conceptual clarity. So we made the rubrics, I think, on level 2 and 3, maybe also 4, a little bit clearer defined. So we actually have a proposition to update those rubrics to help anyone else who tries to use them. We made definitions for what was substantial experiences, and so it's and after that, it was a great standard, and it's actually been accepted university-wide that all bachelor programs should be at least on level 3 of the standard, and all master programs should be at least on level 2. So I mean, even the rector could, it became transparent, useful, people could agree. It was actually a very, very helpful standard.
And here's a question from Suzanne. Which standard
it was
this?
The new optional standard on sustainable development.
So maybe you could say something about what is a substantial versus minor, because that's the key point. If I understand it right.
I can do that. I think I would have to find our paper. You can talk about something else
Okay,
for
but
a
it's in
while.
a
I'll find the
paper.
paper.
I just saw you had just raised hand. I'm not sure if he has anything
Yeah,
to say.
I was going to comment that all the 4 optional standards were very well taken when I introduced them in our faculty, and people were very happy to see those topics among the CDIO, and we have had 4 groups working on those themes, and I've only have had positive feedback on those. I haven't seen the reports yet, but at least for us, it seems that they are working quite nicely. Of course, I can recognize the same things like Christina is saying, that the rubrics, they are the first version of those, and of course there is a lot of interpretation involved, how you see your position among those, but basically they are very, very good optional standards, and we are happy to have them, and a lot of good comments on those.
So I found it. I can share my screen. It's so first the minor versus substantial learning experiences. So here are the descriptions. So it's whether you have clear learning outcomes, whether it's in assessment, a little bit the scope. We said that if it's just 1 credit, then it's minor, and substantial, it's extensively integrated in a core course. And then there is the proposed modifications to the rubric. So yeah, it's clarity on level 1, 2, 3, and 4 actually. So with those clarifications, it turned out to be very useful, and I can't say easy, but it was there were no disputes anymore about whether a program was 2 or 3 or 4. So it became more accepted by the program leaders, because first we used the original for 10 programs as a pilot, and then there were disagreements. The interpretation could not be settled, and then with these clarifications, there were no more disputes.
I think you also quantified level 3, because it mentions 4
sustainable development learning experiences where at least 2 are substantial, including an early introduction.
Was that in the that was also a revision, right? Proposed revision. Yeah.
Yes. So this is paper 104. I put it in the chat. I was actually really happy and proud with this project, because we took the new optional standard as soon as it was decided, and we sort of started running with it. And to just come back 1 year later and even having it adopted institution-wide and having tested it on 100 programs and revised the rubrics, we felt like we were actually quite fast in doing this for once.
That's to be that's according to the book. Very nice to hear.
Yeah, I mean, otherwise the clock frequency is so slow. If it takes 2 years to test it the first time, we thought we have to have it for Bangkok.
Yeah.
That's great.
Hey, Christina, just
Do we have some additional questions or comments?
Yeah, maybe question to Christina. Just wonder if the top management already look for some ways to implement the SDG to the programs. Is that the opportunity that you took?
Yes, exactly, because KTH has been very intent on sustainable development for a while.
Yeah.
And we even have a vice rector for sustainable development, and we have hired an associate professor in higher education and integration of sustainable development. So we're really doing it.
Right.
So the timing of this standard couldn't have been better. It came exactly when we needed it.
Yeah. Good to hear that. And I hope the best for my case also. Yeah. We'd love to try.
Having said that, I don't think the program's rated very highly. So we really have a lot of work to do in the programs, and the standard is going to help us with that.
Yeah.
So I think this is actually a cool case of being able to set new targets and pursue them effectively with the help of CDIO.
And then Anna Rosengren has raised her hand. Anna, do you want to?
Yes. Thank you. I was wondering about how the evaluation of the integration of the optional standard was carried out. I mean, who does it, and how do you have the time to do it?
Yeah, exactly. So it was led by my colleague Anders Rosén. He's in a different session now, but he said, if you really need me, I can pop over. But he had the commission from the Office of Sustainable Development. We have the vice rector has an office for that. So he was commissioned to evaluate programs to see how we were progressing in terms of integrating sustainable development. And because he was part of actually writing this new standard, he just thought, yeah, okay, so let's use it.
I mean, if you go to a bit more quantification, sort of clarifying what is minor, what is substantial, putting a number on a 2 + 2, it also enables more people than the specialists to make a good assessment for their program. So that is something that is helpful.
Okay, thank you. So this one person kind of reviewed course syllabuses and made an evaluation of how well, or what criteria was suitable in the various courses.
Yeah, so also the second author was much involved, Helene Hermansson, and she is a project manager at the Sustainability Office. So I would say Anders and Helene did this.
I understand.
Groundwork.
Okay. Yeah, I understand.
Yeah, and I was mostly just called in for some deliberations. So for me, it was not a big project.
I understand. Okay.
I was more involved in writing the paper than doing the actual evaluations.
Perfect. Thank you.
So let's hear if there are some other comments, perhaps on some of the other optional standards. So there's simulation-based mathematics, there's engineering entrepreneurship, there's internationalization and mobility.
I haven't seen a single self-evaluation on any of those.
We are doing that at the moment, and they should be ready after the summer. We have a faculty day on mid-August, and some of the results will be presented there. But the point that I was going to say is that once we have been in CDIO for many years, like Christina, you and many others we have here, these optional standards kind of gave new life to CDIO in our faculty, because we have been working with the 12 original many years, and now we had something new and something that are relevant to this time. So that's also one good additional positive sign from these additional optional standards.
I also think that people enjoy people enjoy working to their strengths. So if a university is actually doing something good, or something, they are making an effort in some area, they really appreciate to have some tools to help them there. And I think like you and the entrepreneurship standard, I guess it's and the internationalization, there are so many strong aspects, and I think it's a great way to lead by example also from various universities.
Good. Do we have some other comment on the proposals?
I'd like to ask something to Juha and Christina. It seems a mean question, but it isn't. It isn't. I'm looking for arguments there, so hopefully you can help me. But aren't the things that are in the optional standards also already in the quality system of the university? I mean, sustainability is a big goal. Surely there must be some way that they're measuring it already, or isn't there? And
no, it was in the university strategies, but it wasn't clearly defined how it would be measured quantitatively. So actually the decision that was taken was to define the target in the university normal strategy, to define that, operationalize it using the CDIO standard. So it's actually the only place where CDIO is mentioned. The normal CDIO routine didn't appear in the utvecklingsplan, development plan. So it was really a great rejuvenation, if you wish.
Susanne, you are right. Of course, these are things that we have on our agenda anyway. But like Christina is saying, these optional standards kind of gave us a reason to focus these topics even more, and maybe define some concrete actions that what we are really doing and where we are at the moment, for example, with the international activities, because it was our international coordinators and head of international office that were working on those themes together with the program people. And they really have to reflect where they are at the moment and use the CDIO standards as a framework for them to evaluate the things, and gave some kind of platform to set their own activities in. And same with the other optional standards, for example, with the mathematics issues. I think I had about 20 mathematicians talking about these things, and it's something that never had happened before, but now they had the framework to discuss and talk about and give different viewpoints to these topics.
thanks.
Very good. Maybe we should move on to the second question, and that had to do with additional CDIO standards, or well, either as new propositions or with further work on those that are already proposed. And this chart shows a few of them, including industry engagement, including workplace and community integration, including student success, and a number of others. And I think that there's also at least one proposed in this year's conference. So there are two questions maybe here, and that is, are there any views in particular on any of these pipeline proposals, and are there also proposals on how to work forward with additional CDIO standards, or not, so to speak? So I'll open the floor for comments and questions and proposals, and on that level.
I remember seeing a proposal for student engagement the first day. But that was a really nice one, and perhaps that's very close to student success, but no, I think it's a completely different thing.
I think that they were different, although I haven't read this year's paper, but maybe one of the authors is here, so could
Kuntini is here.
Yes.
do you want to say a little bit about your proposal?
Well, I think let's say that we have tried to implement some of the student engagement in our faculties. And during the presentations, I found it very interesting that, in fact, it was very much a standard practice in some universities, because there was comments that it was there for quite some time for students to have a lot of ownership in their own education. In this case, so I suppose it was mostly involves a lot of the culture of the organization and the society itself that is different. I suppose that in some universities in our CDIOs has already fully implemented this one. Some never heard of it. So in general, I think it may be interesting.
We had a roundtable on Monday and about faculty professional development, and one of the things that that came up was that how we could engage and get students' voice into CDIO a bit more, and in that sense, that kind of optional standard might be valuable.
Did you sort of speculate on what could be a rubric or a basis for a rubric? What is, so to speak, immature student engagement, and what is the top level, and is there a sort of a way of codifying this in a way that is similar to a CDIO standard?
Yes, I think that
it being a desirable thing in itself.
Yes, I think that it has to be further refined and maybe need a lot of adjustment in that one. And also the definition of what the student engagement is has to be more or less agreed upon. I mean, what is the scope as well as the depth. That may be I'm sure that it needs a lot of refinement. And actually, the experience from the universities that already has these systems should be very productive.
Thank you. Anyone else who wants to comment on the pool of proposals, or on some as yet
I could
put forward idea?
I could perhaps mention that when we are talking about student engagement, I think that also student experience is going to be very important. Of course, it's difficult to say that this is important for CDIO programs only. I think it's going to be general, but I think that will be works that we will hear of more in the future. Yeah, so that is relating to students. And then I'm also thinking in terms of getting innovation into the way of working as a normal way of working, so to speak. But again, that's not related to CDIO programs only, but to all programs.
innovation of the programs, like in curriculum agility or continuous improvement, or so maybe you could outline a little bit more what you meant by student experience.
Yes. So, for instance, how do they experience the digital university, the campus university, entering the LMS, they encounter a lot of information. Is it easily understood how they are going to navigate in the perhaps in the LMS, let's say, in the course? Do they have possibilities to interact with other students in the same cohort, let's say, in the same course, in the same program, across the university?
Like the customer journey map as a student.
Well, I would like to add that in the student engagement, there are two components. The first one is the scope. Let's say the type of activities, and the second one is the degree or the level of engagement, which it has been studied elsewhere that there's 3 levels more or less. But if you go to the partnership and the ownership level, it is possible to transform the process and make a lot of innovation. So I think it's not that hard to have a true transformations with this kind of degree. But mostly our student engagement is usually in the consultation degree, which is the lowest one, which will usually make some, let's say, continuous improvements on the fixed process, but it will not transform the process itself.
Great. Maybe if we use Kristina's term, that optional standards enable university to play to their strengths, or so what if your university said has some particular strength that they would want to put forward as an optional standard? What could that be?
Well, I think Kristina may know a lot than me. I think she said during the presentation that she used to be a student representative as well.
That is true, I confess. I would be happy to work on a student engagement standard, but I'm also thinking that, I mean, obviously there was a demand for the sustainable development standard, the internationalization, the entrepreneurship. We can hear that people are taking up on them. So I think we need to have two things. We need to have people prepared on working on developing the new standards, but we also need to have people who are waiting for them, who need them, who want them. Otherwise, we're just creating papers on the shelf. So if we can find both, I think those are the standards that we both demand and supply. then those are the standards we should prioritize. So I wonder which are the hottest ones.
Well, I hope that the student engagement will certainly creep into as an let's say optional standards, but as an Asian institute, I'm still quite doubt whether it will gain a lot of popularity here.
But at least we would be able to write it.
Yes, definitely. We're trying to do and change the mindset of the lecturers and so on, but I'm not quite sure whether we can push that much. as you do.
Okay, thank you just for the moment. We have a couple of other people who have raised their hands, and I think Susanne was the first.
Yeah, thanks. I think the student engagement is a super important one. For me, it links a lot to the ownership of learning, and thus a lot of other things which are really important in the education and in the lifelong learning education that we need to kick off basically at the university. So I would be super interested in that one, and also it's quite close to my research. So that makes me very enthusiastic, and I think also like Tine was just saying, it differs a lot per context how far you can get on that scale. But I would love it if the highest rubric would be about, you know, full ownership and participation of the student in its own learning, and perhaps some reciprocal learning. That was one. And then what Anna said about the student experience, I don't know, Johan, if I can share my screen very briefly.
I'll stop sharing and then you should be able to.
Yeah, thanks. Share screen. This is a picture from the curriculum renewal that we did in The Hague a few years ago, where we mapped the experience of the students that we thought they would have in our new program. So we thought about, okay, what happens before, what happens during, what happens after, and then you can think already about, okay, so what is important, what do we offer? So I thought maybe this is a little illustration of what you were talking about, Anna, but I'd love to hear from you.
Could you make it bigger?
Bigger? It's on my big screen, so it looks huge right now. Yeah, there. That's the biggest.
Thank you.
Octopus is a new metaphor for me. I hadn't heard that before.
The sheep with 5 legs, or the. So, but I do feel it's important to think about the experience of the student in the choices that you make. And then, yeah, Anna.
Anna also had a reflection, or
well, yes, this is super interesting, and I really think that this is where all universities basically are going. You were very early, and is it possible? Is it? I mean, is this a secret, or is it possible to share?
Yeah, I can put it in
Very
the chat. I'll do that.
Yeah, wonderful.
I'll put it in the chat. And my last comment, Johan, was about, I don't know if curriculum agility should become an optional standard, or if it's too big of a concept, because we will have the 7 principles and each will have their rubric. So you'll have this nested rubric in a rubric then. So I think we should talk about that before we say like, okay, this is going to be the next optional standard.
Yeah, actually, I like to support your work, Susan, about the curriculum agility. Actually, I follow your work since the last conference, and it, at this very moment, it's even more important. Yeah. So, but to be or to not to be the standard, it is up to the discussion. But I do think that we do need the tools, because, for example, at this very moment, we are in the process of curriculum revision. Right now, before this, the goal might be to trying to have the best guess. What about the next? What about the future of the engineering occupation? But right now, the very important goal might be the flexibility or agility, rather than trying to look to the future of work. Yeah. So I, in a way, I share my my concern as well as support your work on curriculum agility.
Thank you.
Very good. Maybe there are some more universities who want to bring in something that is a particular strength of theirs. Maybe Sinmo wants to.
Yeah. Yeah. Two things from me actually. The first one is, I think, just as a follow-up on the student engagement, I think it also arises from the roundtable that we have, where Anki also shared something that I fully identify with, and that is with regards to e-exams, e-examination and e-proctoring. So the perspective from the students, and in particular, I think Anki highlighted the challenge that he faced when the students how do they see that the exam being how the fairness of this when some of the teammates are cheating. And I think Kuntini also mentioned shared her thoughts on her perspective as well. So I thought that would be another dimensions of student engagements and the feelings that that can be some form of a standard. And because I find that really the students' voice is kind of missing from the current CDIO standards. So I think that would be something that would be useful. The other one that I have in mind that was earlier, I was taking a look at the foresight and the forecast one. Okay, and I realized that they are talking about the revision of the standards of fit frame for master and PhD program. Okay, but however, it triggered my thought in the how to make CDIO more forward-looking by having a standards on foresight. So that I interpret it quite differently then, and this is in terms of more rather than extension of CDIO for the PhD or master's program or whatever program, but this is more for make it more forward-looking. Okay, in terms of, like, for example, after Industry 4.0, who knows what else might come along, right? And current standards, even standard 12, the way I look at it is that it's program evaluation, but in reference to the rest of the CDIO standards. So there are some elements of, I guess, environmental scanning and SWOT analysis that can go into program evaluation per se. So I'm just wondering whether that is it worthwhile to have, it's useful to make it a bit more explicit, that makes CDIO more forward-looking. So by having a standards on some forecast or foresight or something like that along those lines. Okay, a few things on my mind actually. There's also related to student engagement in terms of the foresight. There is I'm currently involved with Singapore University of Technology and Design in a study, and I try to get some input here actually, and from the community in terms of perception of mastery in the age of digitalization. What does this do to the human being as a student when he has to spend years to study, to accumulate the knowledge, and then have to work for a long time to gain the experience, to gain the trust, for example, for lack of a better word, from his superior, let's say, when they have this AI system that they codify the tacit knowledge and wisdom from years of operations into algorithms. And in a time-sensitive manner, when an issue or decision needs to be made very, very quickly, and there you have from the AI, there is a certain prescription to follow or not to follow. So where does this leave the feeling of the human beings? So it is this is where I'm looking at, and what I'm thinking in terms of digitalization, foresight, and student engagement. How do we make them feel that they are still proud of what they are doing? So that's the long and short of it. Sorry, I take quite a bit of time.
So thank you. Very good. We have a few raised hands here. I think Joa is the first, and then Anna. I don't know if you are lowering and raising your hand, or if you're a constant, but anyway, let's hear Joa first and then Anna.
Okay. If we look back in the beginning of CDIO, I think it was some industry concerns that initiated CDIO, and therefore maybe the industry engagement optional standard might be valuable, because I think we still are working for the industry, and we should answer to the needs and requirements that they pose, and that might be something that could be explained or described in an optional standard too.
There are actually several of the proposals that are in that area. Industry engagement, workplace learning, workplace and community integration. So there are a few propositions that have are in the same ballpark. Anna, will you? Is a new raised hand, or is it the?
It was a new hand, yes. So I fully agree with the industry perspective. I think it's very interesting and important. And on student engagement, I was just wondering about the relation to active learning. We're working very intensely on active learning at the moment. Not only coming from CDIO, but from the pandemic and so on. So we have to really ensure that we have knowledge about how to conduct education in a way that stimulates engagement. But that is active learning at the same time. So I was just wondering about how you see upon those concepts, active learning on the one hand, which implies, you could argue, that's how we treat it at our university at least, student engagement. Yeah.
So thank you. There are many facets of the term student engagement. I think the working group would spend some time on chiseling out what it would mean in a CDIO standard context. We have a few minutes left already, and I would also like to collect any views and experiences on using the self-evaluation model for optional CDIO standards. We heard from KTH that the application of them immediately led to some problems, but on the other hand, it also led to some modifications and clarifications and improvements. So that's very useful. Also want to hear if there are some others who have tried out the forms, and what did you experience, and do you have any suggestions?
Johan, I have not tried out. We are still in the progress of revamping our curriculum in terms of coverage of sustainable development, but I look forward to use the rubrics for the optional standards to evaluate how we fare on this. Yeah, but not the other three. We haven't really taken a look at the other three yet. Well, in Singapore Polytechnic, we are sort of institution-wide. We are looking at sustainable development in a bigger way. So there is an institutional-wide effort now to realign some of the learnings towards it. So I look forward to use the standards actually. Yeah, so that's from me.
Good, and then you could compare notes with KTH, who's doing the same thing at the same time.
KTH is way too fast for me.
Very interesting, I suppose. Someone else?
We have tried them, but I don't have any comment at this point, but maybe after the summer.
Well, the new forms are quite recent, so I was maybe suspecting that we wouldn't get so much concrete feedback at this point, but I hope that there will be more over time. Anyway, we only have a few minutes left in the session. So, but I'd like to open to any other comment or question.
Actually, I have the question about the optional standard. So the main standard is one part, but what is the outlook for the optional standard? Do we consider more and more depending on the need, like people said, demand and supply, or we try to kind of limit this to a certain number?
There's no specified number of optional standards.
Mm-hmm.
So it will evolve, I think, with the optional standards that make sense and are and fulfill the criteria. For example, being adopted by several CDIO universities. That's I think one important criteria, that it has some general interest in effort in that way.
Yeah, I see.
Mm-hmm. But there's no fixed number or cap or or so on. But the ideas that are brought forward should be good.
Yeah.
So then to conclude, I think we had a very nice discussion here. So thanks all for your contributions. I think we got some good validation of the proposals, and also some rather immediate ideas for clarification and improvement. We discussed additional standards and student engagement at some length and with some energy, I think. So maybe that is something that should be brought forward. Also, industry engagement was lifted a little bit. So possibly, and that could be a discussion for the council meeting later today, is to walk forward with these two so to speak ideas and see if they can be turned into proposals that can be adapted in the next year or so. So, but by then it's 9:30, and I think we need to end so that we can go to the next session. But again, thank you all for being here. It was a really nice session. I enjoyed it a lot. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Gerard.